Hello and welcome to another Coffee with Developers. Today I'm here with Lee Faus from GitLab, and you're an FCTO, which is a field CTO, which means what kind of field? Like football field, baseball? What does that mean?
Yeah, so when you think about traditional CTOs run the engineering department, and they're focused a lot internally, taking requirements from your internal stakeholders, from your external stakeholders, turning that into product, and then giving it to your customers. And as a field CTO, my job is to go out and work with our customers and helping them implement those features inside their own companies.
Okay, so we had similar things at Microsoft, basically to do on-site sometimes as well, I guess, and dealing with their problems instead of just like remotely helping them out.
Yeah, and if you think about the way that CTOs are very focused on a singular problem, which is their existing platform that they build, that they distribute worldwide. Where our field CTO team, what we do is we take the best practices across many different verticals, many different customers. We collectively take that information and that knowledge that we gain from those customers, and we distribute it to other customers. Because the biggest thing that you don't want to have happen is go out and spend a bunch of money on a new platform and then really struggle to get anything off the ground and not be able to implement best practices, not be able to create reuse. So that's where our team comes in. And then we work with a solutions architecture team who spends a lot of time directly one-on-one with the customer. So we are distributed worldwide, and we might spend maybe 2 or 3 meetings with a customer, and then we sort of disappear for maybe a year or two, and then all of a sudden something comes back up, and then we come back into the customer again, sort of fly in, fly out, those kinds of things.
Cool. Yeah, I always found like being consultant like that found interesting because a lot of times the engineers had their problems already and knew what the problem was. They just needed somebody expensive from the outside to tell their boss that that was the problem. So oftentimes you were more a communicator than or a translator for the company internally than to give them a technical solution. They already knew what they wanted. They just didn't have the resources, or they didn't get the resources until somebody out from the outside spoke the right language for their manager, I guess.
Yeah, it's up leveling a conversation. A lot of times people get caught up in features. So when you move throughout an organization, there's a lot of people who are, I need to implement automation for our build processes. They don't understand there's a business impact to being able to provide that automation and being able to do it in an efficient, scalable way. They just know that as continuous integration. I need to go build a pipeline. So, and then when you think about things of, okay, well, let's say for some of our largest customers, they might have 100,000 projects in GitLab. Well, I don't want to have 100,000 individual pipelines, because a lot of the projects, let's say 80% of our projects are all using Gradle and Java. Well, I should be able to build a common pipeline architecture that any project that is using Java should be able to use. And then this gets into conversations with the executive team of like, what languages do you support? How many versions back of those languages do you support? How do you define end of life for an application? What does your maintenance schedules look like? Because all of those things feed in as requirements for how they go build those best practices inside their organization.
Well, the topic that you proposed that we should chat about was that you basically, which is very clickbaity, is that DevOps is dead. So first of all, like, how do you define DevOps and what killed it?
Yeah, so I worked for, I had my own consulting company back in 2011, and I was working for a large insurance company, and we were doing a lot of things that I think we would put into the bucket of DevOps. And one of the best definitions I ever heard was it's the combination of collaboration, agility, and automation. So if I take those 3 things and I put them together, it allows us to be able to increase velocity. It allows us to be able to up level junior devs to senior devs, gives them a promotion path, helps them build a knowledge base for them to be able to grow by not only learning the technologies that the company uses, but also allowing them to be able to understand who are the other people that they should be interacting with, and being able to write down their ideas and suggestions in a way that makes sense, so we can build knowledge out of that, so we can share it with other engineers down the road. And then finally, the automation piece, which is the piece that everybody picked up on, was the idea of building common pipelines. So if I'm able to say today, going back to the late 90s, a company that I worked for, we had early day bash scripts that just did our build processes out of CVS. And, those builds would take 4 to 5 hours to go do a build. And the compute on that was usually a Dell server that was running under somebody's desktop to be able to go do that. And now with the idea of cloud and being able to have infrastructure that scales with us, we have a lot of compute that's being consumed by these pipelines that are running all of the time for all of the projects whenever a change occurs inside of our source code systems. So those three things, as we start to think about this, is, okay, so what does this new model look like for collaboration and communication? Do I need a central place where I go build my pipelines? Is it now a centralized task? And then last one is agility. So if I think about agility was always a human to human interaction. So I have to have my stand up. I've got to create my tickets. I've got to do my estimations. I'm going to go do my story poker. All of those things now in an agentic AI world, what does that mean to traditional agile processes?
Yeah, do your agents have stand-ups, or like what's going on there? Like, it feels like we're putting the automation up to 11. Like everything becomes like a thing that actually spawns other things and puts things in there. And you said it correctly. I remember when I worked on the Edge browser and I worked on the developer tools, we had the problem that like you had to build the browser every single time you made a change to that, and that was outside collaboration was almost impossible because it needs a very beefy machine to create Chromium from scratch. And so we put the binary out and basically made only the bits that are necessary in another repo, so we allowed people to do that. But with an agentic world, or even let's use the dirty word vibe coding, it seems like the agile idea of building something new every day that extends the one that was before that works seems to be out of the window, and we just build perfect apps right now and then discard them the next day. And there's a lot of bytes going through, and it's really hard to actually find out, give that whole idea of agile improvement, like ongoing improvement in a world where we made software discardable application piece.
I totally agree. What we run into is our stand-ups are now hourly. I mean, if I've got a bunch of agents off doing a bunch of work on my behalf, I could go off and say, okay, everything that you had slated for me for this week, I've quote unquote vibe coded it. I'm not saying that the quality is there. I'm not saying that there aren't any security issues in it. I'm not saying that I reuse the approved frameworks that the enterprise architecture team has given us access to. But I want to let you know I have a working app. And yeah, you can click through it. And this reminds me a lot of early days with Visual Basic. I can remember one time I was using Visual Basic and we were sitting in a room and we had one person's laptop open and we clicked around and dragged the little components around, and we could build a functional thing and had a little access database sitting behind it. And we would take it to the CTO and go, hey, is this what you were imagining? And they're like, this is exactly what I wanted. Ship it. And it was like, no. We've got a lot of stuff in here that have been hard coded. We need to do things for regulatory purposes. We got no. It works. Just ship it. And that's the situation that I see us in right now. And the challenge that we have is because we're allowing these agents to make up their own decisions through inference, what they're doing is they're making choices that are non-deterministic. So you could go build that app right now, and then an hour later come back and use the same prompt with a different LLM and get a completely different app. Different layout structures, you could get different components, you could get different color schemes, but you're still going to have a functional app. Now, they are getting better where we can use context and we can provide it with guidance, but now we're running into this issue that the context windows, they're just not large enough for us to be able to feed in the amount of information that it needs. Anybody who has gone in and tried to use agent tools and MCP will go in and find out very quickly. I mean, you can burn through a 200,000 token context window in minutes. And then you go look at your bill on the other side and you're like, wow, that just cost me $15 for 2 minutes worth of work. You start doing that kind of math and now all of a sudden you're in like top 5 consulting category money for somebody to go build something that they could never reproduce if you ask them to.
Yeah, I mean, and also it's, you don't know how maintainable it is, you don't know how secure it is, you don't know actually what's in it. Like, I mean, we build these black boxes these days that look functional, but we actually don't reuse the core. Like, I mean, that was the idea of the original software development lifecycle. You basically, we started with like paper prototypes, we started with designs, and now the design is the app. That's the story that we're telling, and that's this fairy tale that we always heard. Like you said like Visual Basic or Ball and C Builder as well before that even, and then like Dreamweaver for the web. Like we had this always what you see is what you get, which I always said like is what you so intensely wished you'd gotten, rather than what you see is what you get, because what came out of it was something that needed repairing as well. And there's so much frustration in engineering right now, having to repair things that were created by an agent. We feel like we're rubber stamping code rather than writing things anymore. But is this the future that we want?
So I think one of the things that's really important is I had a colleague that I was talking to, and one of the things that we've gotten away from is using software as a means for solving novel, complex problems. And we treat things like building a web front end in TypeScript and React as something that's novel. And it's not. There's a lot of boilerplate code. But there's a lot of things that we haven't solved on the back end from an architecture scalability. Like, when do I use an event-driven architecture? How do I overcome issues with service-oriented architectures? How do I build things around messaging platforms? Like, a lot of those things, when you ask an AI agent to go ahead and do an evaluation, you get a lot of confirmation bias. Yes, I absolutely think you should use Kafka for this. But what about this particular scenario? Oh, yeah, Kafka wouldn't be a great option in that scenario. Okay, then what would you recommend? Oh, maybe we should use Postgres and just have a intermediary layer. And then you end up in this situation where it just keeps agreeing with you based on what you're telling it, that you never end up coming back to that novel idea. But the really good software engineers that I'm talking to, they read through the confirmation bias, sort of ignoring it, and they're using it as a way to be able to bounce ideas off of, to try to find a lot of things that really good software engineers struggle with, is finding those corner cases. We do a great job building towards the sunny day scenario, but what are the rainy day scenarios that I should consider? And from those rainy day scenarios, that may change my architectural decision of the direction that I'm headed in. That's something I have found very good with AI right now, is if I can get it into a point where I can make it think about things repetitively. So almost like a for loop. And I make it go over itself and say, every time that you go back in and you make a suggestion, I want you to find the anti-pattern in that. And then I want you to argue for and against, and then watching it argue against itself about which way is the right way. And I've even had it come back and say, you know what? I see advantages in both. And I'm like, great. I now see you as an architect, because that's what a good architect does. Yep, I can see the advantages of both, but somebody's still going to have to make a decision. So what are the other criteria that we should use to be able to make a decision. And that's where I think the evolution has to get to in these is right now it's just repetition and memorization at the lowest level, building those things where we already have seen a lot of TypeScript, React type applications, but we haven't seen those large scale applications like the Netflix type architectures. And how would I replicate that kind of architecture? Or something like X? What does the backend look like for X? And how do I replicate something like that? That's where I think it needs to evolve to before senior engineers are going to feel like, yeah, you know what, this is going to go ahead and really have an impact in the work that I do.
I mean, I've seen people that build agents that actually watch each other and actually give each other feedback on that, which feels like a clever thing. But again, it burns through a lot of tokens and it costs a lot of money. So that's the weird bit about it. Like, I mean, I can battle my junior engineers in the office and basically let them come up with different ideas. That seems to be cheaper. But like we try to actually automate these things away and we never realize just the extra cost that's in there. Now, you've been talking about in the when we prepared this that there is an invisible software development lifecycle. What do you mean by that? Like, is it not as obvious as it used to be, or is it just so shortened now that we even don't care anymore?
So when you think about what we've done in DevOps is we've built either a single platform like GitLab, and we have everything inside the software development lifecycle that everybody goes to. There's a web UI. We build our pipelines. We build our security, our code quality. Everything sits somewhere else. And what we're starting to see a little bit is as these agents are running locally on our machines, that they're taking away a lot of those tasks where we needed a centralized platform or from a GitLab perspective, a do-it-yourself DevOps platform. So if you've got multiple tools, so you got your Agile planning, your source code management, collaboration, and then your CI. If you take that and you start to think about what the machines that we have today and using AI agents running locally, and I've seen this with a lot of people that are, let's say, running Olama and running 128 gig of memory. They're looking at this as, you know what, a $5,000 laptop is a lot cheaper than the $5,000 a month that I would spend in tokens. So I could go ahead and have an agent that goes ahead and measures my code quality. I could have an agent that measures my security, and it's doing everything as the code is getting generated, rather than me having to create a commit, do a push, and then trigger something on the back end, which is then going to use more CPU cycles on the back end. Because it's running something that's locally, it can also infer what kind of changes I was making. So let's say it generated new docs, and those docs were all in the README. Well, it's not going to run an agent to go do a security scan on the README file. Where if I was in Jenkins or if I was in a CI system, I would have to build a rule that would tell me that because there was the only change inside this particular commit was just the README, I need you to ignore running a CI pipeline. So there's a lot of things that we're starting to see locally. One of the other things that we're running into is, as you were describing, these things will generate a lot of code. Well, right now, humans build our task lists. We are building our agile process. Here's my user story, and here are the 5 tasks that I need to complete. Well, if I go generate 1,000 lines of code, what if inside those 1,000 lines of code, what if there's 5 other tickets in the backlog that code actually solves? My agile process is actually inverted because I'm now writing code that already satisfies things that are not even in my current sprint. So do I automatically pull those things into the sprint because now they're closed? Do I ignore the code because that ticket isn't in the sprint? Like now we have these political conversations that are going on trying to figure out what do I do? And a lot of developers are like, I don't care. Like I'll just close the tickets. If it wrote the code and it maps to something, let it close out things in the backlog. There's nothing wrong with cleaning up the backlog or fixing a bug that existed for 3 years. Let's just fix it now. Let's do it while it's already here on my workstation. So we're no longer defining these sort of rigid processes where we would think about a software sprint. So say it's 3 weeks and we do our sprint planning in the beginning, and then every Friday we go give a demo. Like, we're using agents to do a lot of that routine work. I have a lot of customers that I talk to, they figured out how to go ahead and use agents to automatically generate their stand-up. So they can read through, here's everything that was done yesterday, here's everything that's planned for today, here's everything that we're going to be working on tomorrow. Here is what a burn down chart looks like, not just for the sprint, but for this particular segment of the sprint. So you can see, are we on target? Are we off target? And a lot of those dashboards and stuff are being created on the fly in real time, that you don't need to wait for somebody to go into a centralized server to go figure out how to do that. It's becoming part of the code base. It's becoming part of their IDE. We're now hearing people talk about ADEs, agentic development environments. So as we start to look at those things, will the traditional software development lifecycle, using DevOps for those three things that we talked about in the beginning, does that start to break down? Because how many of those things will run locally versus how much of that will need to be run distributed in a server environment?
And it stops us. It lacks the overview that you had in the past. Like, that's the thing. Like, if a lot of stuff happens closely, and like different tasks are being closed and different tickets are being closed, that's great to happen. But you want to have the overall insight of what happens in the centralized place as well. So that was the whole idea about the Agile methodology, that we have continuous documentation and continuous looking into things and changing those things around. And now if a lot of that gets automated and other machines close it for you, do you think there's a lot of mid-air collisions and a lot of merge conflicts coming from that?
That is one of the things that makes me nervous, is a lot of these systems that we have built over the last 20 years are all per user pricing. So now you have 200,000 agents acting on your developer's behalf. Do you now need to go buy 200,000 seats? I mean, so we're seeing a lot of companies start to move towards consumption-based pricing, but what does consumption mean? What am I consuming? Am I consuming CPU? Am I consuming memory? Am I consuming tokens? Am I consuming network? So a lot of those things, I think a lot of companies are testing the waters, trying to figure out what is the right consumption metric that we should be using. I also see a lot of companies, geez, I remember back in the old Rational days, we're seeing a lot of people go back to the old Rational floating license model. So, you know, I'm going to look at, let's say, monthly active users, and I will charge you based on the number of interactions that I saw. And I'm not going to care if that interaction was done as a human or done as an agent. So if there was connectivity, I'm going to charge you for that quote unquote license for that particular month, and I'll break it down into monthly increments. So
now you made me remember Rational Rows and XML Spy and those things. And oh god, yeah.
And it's you know, I tell people we've seen this in the software industry a lot. You know, everything that is old becomes new again. And are we going back to a model where, you know, early days when I started off building software, you know, we didn't know you had flat pricing. I mean, I remember WebSphere application developer back in the early 90s. I mean, it was like $8,000 for a WebSphere application developer. And now we look at people where you go to buy IntelliJ for $125 a year, and people are like, oh, $125, geez, that's a lot of money. And I'm going, geez, if only I could get WebSphere application developer for $125 back in the day. So, but I think that idea of one of the things that I saw when I was at GitHub and I was at GitLab is a lot of executives feel like part of what they were sold, they aren't able to leverage. And what I mean by that is in a pull request or in a merge request, it was always sold as a means for being able to capture knowledge. So you could use that knowledge to be able to make future decisions. And what I see, I even see this in the open source community. You can go out and look at a lot of open source projects on GitHub, and you go out there and you'll see somebody open up an issue, and somebody is like, you should have searched the issues first or searched the pull request, because we already decided not to fix this thing. And somebody will want to leave their issue open because they're like, no, it's been 2 years since you investigated. I think we should investigate again. That's fine, but you're not a maintainer of the project. The maintainers have already decided that they're not going to build it. Just like if you were working for a large enterprise and the CTO says, no, we're not going to build this, then you would have to wait until there is a new CTO for you to be able to bring that forward again. And because we aren't able to scrape that data and use it as future knowledge, and we're not using it properly, I've also seen people, and unfortunately, I've seen this in a lot of large enterprises, there's people that will weaponize those technologies as well. They'll use it for political gain. Oh, I'm going to make sure that the VP of engineering has to approve this pull request because I want them to see what you're doing. So they assign the VP of engineering. The VP of engineering comes in and goes, Lee, what are you doing? We shouldn't be building this. This is not part of our, well, no, but I wanted to think outside the box. Okay, so now all of a sudden I get dinged by the VP of engineering because they got a notification because they were added to it. Now, that was never the intent. It was never, I would like to think that this is more the exception than it is the rule. But that also meant that a lot of engineers that got caught up in those situations want more autonomy. And as they want more autonomy, they're seeing this agentic AI evolution in the space to giving them more autonomy. Like, no, don't worry about reviewing this because you know what? OpenAI wrote the code. So you can just trust it. Well, no, because OpenAI wrote it, I actually am going to interrogate it even further. I'm going to need better reviews than if it was written by a human. And we've been having a lot of internal discussions where we're at a fight right now where I'm telling educators in the university settings that we're actually going to need more engineers in the future. And the reason why is if you've ever been in a classroom setting, one of the hardest things to do is like when we go to the lab and we go to write code, greenfield, starting from scratch, people get really good grades doing that. But when you go to give them their midterm or their final exam and you give them a section of code and say, find the 10 things wrong in this code, they really struggle reading somebody else's code. And they can't find the problems in it. And this is everything that we are doing right now. We are having AI write all of this code, and we don't have enough people who can read it, interrogate it, find out what's missing, do a code review and fix it as a human, and then go back in and then follow that process over again. So we would be shifting our primary responsibility from code creators to code reviewers. But for me, I'm like, okay, well, this is great because now I can have an engineer come in, write better unit tests around that code. We can make sure that it aligns properly to the business objectives. A lot of the things that we don't do when we are doing greenfield because we get excited. Ooh, I get to build something new. Let me go off and create from scratch. We don't think about these edge cases. If I'm already being bound by a contract inside of an issue, inside of a ticket, I now can use my critical thinking skills to go look at the code that was written by AI and go, does this actually meet the intended contract that this was intended for? And again, that idea of that invisible SDLC providing me autonomy gives me a lot of capability for me to be able to do that locally without having to do something from a web browser and having to click through a bunch of different checkboxes. I can follow my normal working process.
To me, that was always a normal way of actually becoming a better developer. Like being the idea is like you start as a junior engineer and you write a lot of code, and the more senior you get, the less code you write, the more code you review, the more best practices you write, the more you document what has been done and what has been done wrong in the past. So this kind of like that level of like writing it, that skill set has to go down to junior developers right now. But you're right, because universities and even worse, like boot camps and stuff never teach you that. They just teach you how to build things from scratch. And in 30 years of my career, I've built 2 products from scratch. and about 400 products that I had to maintain or redo or completely take the wiring out and put together again to understand what the hell was going on because there was no documentation. And that's the kind of like that people saying like that you as a developer you're going to be a creator all the time. That's the biggest lie that I've seen out there, because we have a lot of software that has been accumulated in the last 50 years already that needs maintenance. So the question now is, developers as knowledge workers, as people who can actually review other people's code, how do we manage to get developers onto that level faster, because it's necessary now?
Man, what a great question. And I love the word that you used there. I am seeing a transition from us thinking about everybody in the software development lifecycle having defined roles and then asking them to fit that role. So, product manager, here's the skills I need you to be a product manager. You're a software engineer. Here's the skills I need for you to be a software engineer. And I'm seeing AI turn us into knowledge workers, where if we think about, there's something in the education space called Bloom's taxonomy. And Bloom's taxonomy starts at the bottom, which is memorization, repetition, which is what we would do in elementary school. It's how we learn our primary colors, learn the alphabet, learn languages. Things like that are all done through repetition and done through memorization. And as you go up Bloom's taxonomy, you end up getting to a point where the highest level of learning is when you are able to teach a concept to another human. So what I am seeing is I'm seeing this ability for us to migrate away from saying you are a product manager to me saying you are a knowledge worker. Now, you are a knowledge worker, and if we added some gamification into this, you are a knowledge worker who has a badge for product manager, but on a scale from 1 to 5, you are a 1 product manager, so you're on the lower end. Okay, well, can I give you some agents that will allow you to level up to a product manager level 3? So if you use these 2 agents, I can take your ideas and things like that, flesh them out, help you create a PRD, help you get your ideas across, help you do business justification, help you go do competitive analysis, help you create a total addressable market, things like that that a traditional product manager would go do. So I could absolutely build agents to help you level up there. Same thing for a software engineer. I liked what you talked about when you were talking about creation. Like, if we think across history as some of the greatest artists of all time, whether it's musician or music or whatever, it's not that they created thousands of things. It's that they've created a handful of things that everybody remembers. And those things have stood the test of time. And that is what I'm starting to see on the software side is I don't need a lot of different web frameworks until something comes along that is novel and helps me build something that is better or makes my job easier. Agents might help me do that. Other things along the lines of being able to move from a front-end engineer to being a full-stack engineer. What does that mean from a security engineer perspective? What agents could I have that convert me from a knowledge worker in the software space that helps me do more security, code quality, things like that? So will we end up in a world where we're hiring knowledge workers to come be inside this space, and then you'll have specific capabilities across your career where you have gained knowledge yourself, whether that be through education or experience, and then we will augment those capabilities through AI to allow you to create more abilities. But what we need to do is we need to have people who are at the highest level of Bloom's taxonomy that can go build and teach those agents how to create that augmented skill set. And that's the thing that I see that's missing right now. We're trying to just be consumers of AI and not thinking about how we create specific agents to augment those specific knowledge worker capabilities. Now, we're seeing some of it with things like Crew AI and other things where we're building specialized agents for specific knowledge worker categories. And I think you'll see more of that over time.
Well, there's a whole movement to go to like small models rather than large language models, to go to specific knowledge worker, database knowledge in a system. And I think that makes total sense, because like the idea of like the idea of just getting the next word that might be the best thing to answer, which is what an LLM is to a degree. It's like an auto completion of your mobile phone keyboard in the past as well, was a similar thing. The confirmation bias is something that I want to go back to. You said basically that the sunny day code that we write is also the one that we learn in school, and we learn in boot camps and stuff, and then we get into the real production. And you always have to think 2 or 3 steps ahead. Like the best code I've written was one that actually was paranoid, was expecting everything to go wrong and not expecting anything to be in the right format and validating everything. But there has been a whole movement in development in the last 10 years, I think, where we went through a React framework and these kind of, or jQuery before that, where we went into the like, just ship it and don't worry about it. The machine will fix it for you. And people trusted the machines more to actually do that for you, or the frameworks as well. Now LLMs are sycophantic by design. They basically just want to be liked, and they want to give you an answer. And if you tell it like that was totally wrong, like, oh, you're totally right, I was wrong. And but in code, that's a dangerous thing, isn't it? Like, how do we get past this level of like, who's accountable for the machine writing horrible code that breaks?
Yeah, it's not just writing horrible code. Like, I remember, I don't forget who the quote is from, but if the product is free, remember you are the product. So they want to take your data, they want to take your knowledge, they want to use that information to go build other products. And this confirmation bias, we need to think about, well, why are they confirming what we're doing? They're trying to make us feed into the psychology of they're right, that I'm right, so I want to continue using it. And every time that I iterate on an idea, they're just going to charge me more tokens. I have a demo that I give to executives, because when we talk about this fight that's going on right now, we have executives that are doing reductions in force saying, well, AI can just replace these knowledge workers. And I'm like, we'll see. Come back in 18 months and tell us how that's working out for you. And then on the other side, we have people that are like, hey, AI is just another tool. It's not a strategy, it's a tool. Let me put it into the people that I know are interested in using this tool and get really good at using the tool. And we'll see how much faster they can move as they go into building good quality software. And this confirmation bias is spanning between the two of these, that the CEOs or CTOs are coming in and saying, see, I just asked ChatGPT and it told me I'm right. And the engineers on the other side are saying, they're telling you you're right because they're just telling you what you want to hear. Ask it for a differing opinion. Ask it for what are the ramifications of this. And when you learn to prompt things properly, it's no longer a confirmation bias. It ends up, we got to learn how to ask proper questions. We're so used to asking questions like we would ask Google. The one thing that I found interesting doing some research around how AI works is, if you go Google and say, what are the top 10 places to visit in Germany? I don't get the top 10 places based on reviews and things like that. What happens is Yelp and their restaurants have bought ads, and through those ads, they have uplifted certain locations. But it's when you're in a small little town outside of, let's say, Berlin, and you're in a small little town and you go in and talk to the locals, like, what should I go see? Oh, how long are you here? If you're only here for the weekend, man, you've got to check out this place. This is, nobody knows about it. They've got this amazing waterfall. You're at, it's the right time of year. The leaves will be changing. You'll be able to get some great photographs if you're a photographer. Like, they start to listen to the question that you're asking, and you're getting very localized. Like, back to your point of being able to have the smaller localized LLMs. So right now I'm just getting a general internet type of view, and that's where the confirmation bias is coming from, because it sees everybody's response. Where if I ask a very specific pointed question to a very small LLM, I'm going to get a much differing type of response. One of the demos that I give to executives when they're like, show me why this doesn't work, And I'm like, okay, it's a very easy thing. What I do is I show side by side. Anybody who has ever been to college or through high school, we teach you how to do recursive functions. And the number one thing to do a recursive function is a Fibonacci sequence. So give an input, build out the Fibonacci sequence. It's usually about 5 to 6 lines of code, no matter what language you're writing it in. And so I hand it off to AI and I ask one, I'll say, make this more performant. And I'll tell the other one to document it and make it so it's maintainable. Basic prompts that you would give to any LLM. Making it so it is optimized, you get this crazy, complex, bitwise, left exclusive, or how things move. And I'm sitting there going, well, that's not very maintainable. And it takes it from 6 lines of code to about 60 lines of code. And then when I ask it to make it maintainable, it breaks it apart and writes all these docs. It ends up becoming 250 lines of code. So then I ask, like, if I'm in an audience or whatever, I'm like, so which one of these would you review and say it's okay? And they're like, neither one. I'd reject both of them. And I'm like, but you've already spent the money for the tokens. So what do? Do you this is what we're seeing. We'll reprompt it to try to get it back to the point. And I'm like, but what you really want is you just want what was already written. Or you want the AI to come back to you and say, Chris, phenomenal job. Got nothing more to add. This is exactly the way I would have written it. But that's not the way that AI is built today. AI is built that no matter what you ask it, it is always going to be additive. I have yet to see, when I'm doing a refactoring, for it to go ahead and read through the code and say, I can make this better by removing these 2,500 lines of code, because they don't charge you for deletions of code. They charge you by token for additive lines of code. And I'll find it adding things that are already existing somewhere else in the code base, but because it didn't have the context of the entire application, it never even looked at that part of the code.
Yeah, so the additive part is the interesting bit, and also when you say that the machine will keep you engaged, and that's the whole time in product problem that I found, like, where everybody compares. When I worked, for example, on developer tools, our measurement was like, okay, we want people to say how long have they been in your developer tool, and was it as long as watching YouTube? And you're like, no. If my developer tool, which was a debugging tool, did its job, then basically people went in, found the bug, fixed it, and went out of it. So how long they stayed in the application is actually not a measurement of how good a quality it has. But everything else is like, yeah, as you said, like you're paying with your interaction with the thing, with your information. And I found that actually really worrying. I became a web developer because I needed a text editor and a browser. I didn't want to pay for a license. I didn't want to pay for an IDE. I didn't have the money to pay for an IDE. I wouldn't have become a developer if I couldn't have done that in the past. But now it seems like the big dream that we sell to junior developers is like, you can become $1 million employee within like 2 weeks with AI, but you have to pay $100 a month just to start coding. And that feels weird to me. That feels like, is it just me who realizes that it's just a subscription in disguise?
No, I don't think so. For me, talking to university students, there's obviously the concern that AI is going to take the job market away from them. And I'm like, yes, be cautiously optimistic. I think you're going to end up finding out that it's not everything is cracked up to be. And it's just going to be another tool that you're going to use when you're at work. There will be certain areas for non-novel use cases that will be able to build things like if I'm in Ruby on Rails and I've got a CLI to generate my controller and control my front end and control my database. Like, sure, AI could go generate that just as easily as I could get it from a CLI. But when you're trying to build business rules and you're trying to understand where a bug is coming from, it might be able to find the location where it thinks the bug is happening, but that isn't necessarily a replacement for using a proper debugger and walking through the code and stepping through and finding out that the reason that happened is because there's a null pointer exception that occurred somewhere else in the stack. And that's what's causing this other out of memory error somewhere else. So a lot of these things, I'm like, that it's not going to get rid of a lot of those things. So, and a lot of people today are now using things like Llama or VLLM, and they're trying to run things locally, and they're using these really small models, and they're not getting great results. They're getting something that's generated, but it's not something that they feel like, oh, this is like, I could have written that. Like, they're not getting something like they were talking to OpenAI and using GPT 5.1 and paying $18 per million tokens. And people don't realize how quickly you burn through 1 million tokens. And, you know, Cursor found this out by being able to try to give you unlimited for a month. And then there were a lot of people that started vibe coding a lot of stuff, and they realized they were losing money as people were doing it. So they had to flip the model to now make it more of a consumption basis, and giving you just a flat fee for a certain number of tokens per month. And then you've got Anthropic on the other side going ahead and just saying, okay, well, if you're not paying for the top tier as an enterprise customer, we're just going to limit and throttle you based on how many interactions you can have in a given day or in a given hour. So a lot of people are starting to realize that this is a subscription. And the more that they rely on it, like I tell people, go get on an airplane with your laptop and then go write code again. Because as you start to connect and you try to open it up and try to connect to your LLM of choice, and you find it taking 2 minutes to respond to a request, you're going to start to get back into the mode of saying, I'll just write this myself. And those are the things that I think we're starting to get back to. I'm seeing a lot more engineers being like, okay, I'm going to use this not as a strategy, but as a tool. And I'm going to use it more for productive purposes for myself.
I think my most annoying thing is that there is no feedback loop, that there's a lot of like frozen knowledge. Like the best answer on Stack Overflow 5 years ago to a certain thing is the thing that the LLM gives me because more people have upvoted it. But it was like sunny day developers that uploaded it. Like there's so many solutions out there that sound valid, but actually are very, very dangerous because they don't think about the consequences of the things. And those are the ones that are the shortest. So an LLM would actually give you those as an auto completion. So what can we do about that? What can we do about like asking like, okay, I said 3 times, please don't give me that again. I can do a local RAG, of course, and I can do a local MCP for that. But it feels to me like we have a lot of knowledge that is basically frozen in free and light models right now. And that is really outdated information that we somehow need to update, but it's too expensive to reweigh the whole model.
Yeah, that's something somebody above my pay grade is going to have to solve. It's like the scenario that I've seen is, let's say I'd like to have conversations with ChatGPT or Claude, and just to ask it different things that I'm not knowledgeable about, and see what information it gives me. And then I do the same thing like I would do if I saw something on X. I'm going to go and review what it told me, and I'm going to sort of fact check it myself and go and read through things. But then if you leave that history, and this is the thing that makes me really nervous. So if you look on the left-hand side of either ChatGPT or Claude, you have this whole history of all of your conversations. It uses that history for any current conversations. So if you're like me and you're sort of scatterbrained and your conversations are going back and forth between 18 different things all at once, it starts to pull in areas of a conversation that you may have had 3 months ago, and it pulls in a conversation. You're like, that really doesn't make sense in this context. How did you arrive at pulling in that conversation into this? And then you ask it to go into that, and then that takes you down a whole different rabbit hole. And then you're like, but what was I originally asking for? And then you come back, and like we said, and now I just realized I just burned through 3 million more tokens. And so the more that we get where we want to interrogate or we want to ask it to flesh out why it's making its decisions. Like for me, I think about things, I want to see AI do a better job of AI provenance. Like, where did you decide to pull this code from? Was it from Stack Overflow? Was it from Reddit? Was it from GitHub? Is this from a trusted public repository that I feel comfortable? I'm writing Go code. Great. Did you pull this as an example out of Kubernetes? I probably would trust the Google developers that are building Kubernetes. If it's coming from somebody's personal project that they are a hobbyist and you pulled that Go code from their repository and it hasn't been maintained for 5 years, I would like to have that provenance too. I would like to know, where are these models? Where is the code actually coming from? And I think that's where a lot of people, like you said, they get nervous without knowing where it's actually coming from and not being able to fact check it. We have to internalize. And I make this joke with every engineer that I talk to. Really good engineers, we all have this ability that when we're working in code, and I've written a lot of Java code, and you would get to a point, you would write code and you would go into a Gradle build and you would know it's not going to compile, but you just want to get to the next step. And then it'll be like 3 hours later in a coding session, you go ahead and you write some code and all of a sudden you sit back and you go, that's it. I almost don't even need to compile it. I know right now, if I go ahead, it's going to compile. And you go and compile it and everything comes out green and everything's good. And you're like, you have that ability to be able to know that. And that's the thing that I'm seeing with a lot of senior devs. They see the code that's being written by AI and they just know this isn't right. And so what they do is they keep trying to prompt it to make it be right, instead of just going in and saying, okay, well, you gave me 40% of what I need. Let me just go in and fill out the other 60%. They get stuck in this model of trying to reprompt it, but it's going to delete the first 40%. And it's going to rebuild it every time. So we end up in this situation where we've got to do better with, how do I blend my AI written code with my human written code, and then being able to provide the provenance for me to be able to tell you what code was written by Lee, what code was written by Claude. And that way, when somebody else comes in and does a review, we can go ahead and look at both of them independently.
Well, I mean, we had a lot of coverage here, and I mean, we want to keep these kind of short. We could talk for hours, I think. One thing I found is that a lot of people start actually asking for code generated by AI to be somehow flagged. So actually in the repository, you know that there is no point looking through it because it's going to be deleted in a half an hour anyways. But there seems to be a lot of like people generating code and then pushing it like to open source projects with like 6,000 lines of code in 5,000 packages. What is your advice for developers right now, for junior developers that are worried about the job market, that are worried about like what they need to do? Like probably you said already, AI is a tool, but what skill set do you think is really useful that people might not think about when they get started right now? What do you think is a task, is a skill that made you what you are right now and that you look for when you hire people?
Yeah. For every university student that I talk to today, I'm like, lean into AI. Don't look at it trying to replace you and trying to compete with it, because it's cheaper than you. So a lot of executives, they're going to go for cheaper, not better. A lot of them go for cheaper. So lean into it and figure out all of the terminology. What is an LLM? What is an agent? What are agent tools? What is MCP? What are MCP tools? How do all of these things work together with things like RAG? How do you feed it more context? How large of a context can you give it before one of the things that I've recently learned is I've been an API developer for 20 years. And I was like, oh, like an agent tool is just an API endpoint. It's not. The inference from the agent will determine which tool it thinks it should use. So if I wanted to, let's say, do AST grep through some source code to pull something out, it's not hard coded to say when you see these words, I want you to run AST grep. It's going to infer when it sees certain words in a combination, it should go use that tool. And all of us who have ever used Elastic in the past, we used to have a dictionary, and those dictionaries map to certain things in search. And that's how we built inference for searching through code. I'm like, think about novel ways about how you can map these things and start to figure out ways for yourself to be able to get better responses. So is it the context window? Is it building your own tools? Is it building your own MCP server? Like, learn how to use the technologies. And then what I would do is, let's say you get into an interview, and let's say it's one of the big technology companies. I would be upfront with them and say, would you mind if I use AI? But these are all tools that I've written. Here's my GitHub profile. Here are all the tools that I've built. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the tools that I built to be able to answer your questions. If my answers are not better than what you would get from another human or another AI, then I don't believe you should give me the job. But because I've learned how to use AI as a tool and it has helped me answer these questions better than anybody else that you're going to interview, I would think you would want me as part of your team. So lean into it. Make sure that it does what you want it to do. Because I do think you're absolutely right, Chris. Being able to use smaller models, like use Ollama, make a small model that's a 7B model running on your local machine. Make it respond better using better context, better rules, better whatever than you could get if somebody who's just using something generic through Claude Code talking to Anthropic. Make it that you can show them that you can get better responses. And I think that would mean a lot to an employer.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Lee. That was Lee Faus from GitLab, and that was Coffee with Developers for today. So, I mean, if you're interested, we could publish an article about this as well. It would be interesting to see some of the bits and bobs to reread, to read up afterwards. And yeah, where can people reach you? Do you want to be reached? Do you want to talk to people? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, because as a field CTO, I basically live in LinkedIn. That's where I keep a lot of my connections, especially with executives, things like that. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Lee Faus on LinkedIn, so you can find me very easily there. Also, I am continuously on X, so you can find me there. Happy to talk to anybody who wants to reach out.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Lee. This was Coffee with Developers for today, and we see you in the next session. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chris.